You're listening to episode 40 of the Confident Writer podcast with Jane Pike. Hello, fabulous person. I have just had a coffee. I've done some yoga. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. And I'm feeling ready to talk to you today about comfort zones. Now, this is something that feels particularly relevant because I am in the midst of taking myself through what I have named the Brave Bucket Challenge. And I know that many of you out there are adventuring along with me, which has just been the most fabulous time. Now, if you have no idea what it is that I am talking about, I created this process for gently and incrementally expanding my comfort zone and making sure that I was taking action on the things that I might have been putting off for one reason or another. It's not a process of throwing yourself in the deep end. It's just a process of recognizing what it is that you are ready for, but you might need that little extra nudge to make happen. And the motivation behind it was that I have 3 clinics coming up over the next few months. One, actually at the time that you'll be listening to this, I'll either be going to the clinic the next day or already there. And if you're listening to this from a space in the future, then obviously this will be a retrospective experience. But those 3 clinics, I have 2 classical dressage clinics and 1 working cow clinic because I like to keep things spicy. And all of those things feel like a leap into the unknown, mainly because, as many of you know, I've been going through the process of starting D under saddle. That's the first time for both of us, incidentally. And so these clinics are really that next step up. They represent that movement from doing things at home and solidifying the basics, which I know is kind of an ongoing process, but they're a step forward, like they're a step forward into working under the instruction of someone else, going into environments which both of us are unfamiliar with, and everything that comes off the back of that. Now, last week's episode, I discussed with Kate Negranti some of the mindset things behind putting yourself out there. So that's really worth a listen if you haven't already done so. But today I wanted to talk about what it means to expand our comfort zone and why we may experience resistance while we are doing so, because I think this awareness is so key and the reason that many of us get held back when we feel like we're trying to move forward, when we're getting in our own way. Just before I get into it, I want to say that this challenge is available for anyone who wants to be a part of it. I have been running through it in real time because it's obviously something that is actually happening in my real life, so that makes sense. But it's something you can pick up at any point, and you can sign up for it by going to my website, www.confidentwriter.online, and you'll see on the homepage, if you scroll down a little bit, a link to join up. I'll also put the link in my show notes if you want to jump in there and go directly to it. The other thing that I have started, which is temporary, is a pop-up Facebook group related to the challenge. I actually opened that just a couple of days ago, but the reason for it was I know that support is so key and I wanted to be available to help you work through any stuck points that might be coming up. So even if you haven't started or you're midway through and you're not in the Facebook group yet, jump in because it is a chance to ask me those questions and to look at what is going on for everyone else. At the point, again, that you'll be listening to this, there will be recordings already in there that I've gone through. So definitely worth checking out. And I will pop the links to those in the challenge also. So comfort zones, a little bit about comfort zones. Why is it so hard to negotiate our comfort zone? And the first thing is that whenever we get to the edge of our comfort zone, what typically or what always happens is that we start to have some pretty ferocious conversations with the itty bitty shitty committee, or that little voice inside our heads that, tells us what we can and can't do. All of you will be familiar with this voice, I have no doubt about it, in some shape or form, but the itty bitty shitty committee really comes to the party at these points because they really are interested in keeping us safe. And expansion outside of what it is that we know, even if it's what we want, represents a leap into something that is unfamiliar to us. So when that happens, these little voices pop up as a protective mechanism, although they can be cruel and not that nice to converse with. But if you can understand that having this internal critic pop up is actually an expression of you moving into a bigger version of yourself or progressing forward in some way, it means that you are liberated from the idea that you actually have to pay attention to them. They're very separate from the rational voice, which I think is something that we can intuitively differentiate between, meaning that if you are in conversation with the itty bitty shitty committee, you can typically get a feeling that that is what's happening. Whereas if you are in conversation with something which may be voicing concern, for instance, do you think you're actually ready for this? Is this something that you need to prepare your horse a little bit better for? Like that, those two questions, they're not necessarily designed to bring you down, right? They could be very valid questions. So that rational voice and that critical voice or that hypercritical voice of the itty bitty shitty committee is something that we need to learn to differentiate between. And to me, the best way to do that is to go with your gut. We know that feeling when we are shaming ourselves or being overly critical, and those thoughts are usually on a loop. They have similar tone, they have a similar story that they're bringing up, and they have similar concerns that they bring up time and time again. The other way to differentiate between the rational voice and the voice of the committee is that the committee tends to have very little value feedback in what it is that they present, and also they are overtly personal. So who do you think you are to do that would be an expression of the itty bitty shitty committee. It's personal, it feels like an attack, and there's a nasty aftertaste that we get in our mouths through listening to it. Conversely, if we were to think about the rational voice, which might say, is this something that you're prepared for? There is some kind of value feedback that we can get from that. The answer might be, yes, we're totally prepared for this. But you can see that it's not crazy personal. You know, it's not an attacking voice, it's a considered voice that we can choose to pay attention to or not. Something to practice, something to be aware of, and something to differentiate between, because not all criticism is useless or needing to be discarded. It's just we need to learn to differentiate between that which has value feedback, which allows us to make decisions which are in the best interest of ourselves and our horses, and the voice of the itty bitty shitty committee, which is basically getting in our way and disempowering us from creating and taking constructive action. Comfort zones then. What is it about them that makes it so difficult to navigate or to elasticize? And this is a word that I use a lot when it comes to comfort zones, because I love to think of this gentle expansion and contraction. Actually, let's start with that now that I've thrown that in there. Expansion and contraction is something that is typical of life. Everything is expanding and contracting all of the time. The seasons are one of expansion and contraction. You know, we have this spring season, which is a very expansive season of growth and opening up. We have summer, which is perhaps the ultimate expansion as everything is out there and bright and blooming. And there's this very, I was going to say energetic energy, but you know what I mean. This kind of outward energy which correlates with that season. And then we have the contractive seasons of autumn and winter, which are more inward facing, more inward focused, where we're actually allowing things to marinate and restore and rest so that we're able to move into these expansive phases again. The thing that we get tricked into thinking is that instead of seeing things as cyclic and expansive and contractive in that sense, we are thinking of things in a very linear fashion. We're thinking of straight lines of movement forward, 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 forward. And when we somehow feel that we've reached a plateau, or that we actually naturally come into that inward phase where we're not being as productive, quote unquote, or as outward as we think we should be, and that should is really key here, it's because we are buying into this idea that progress means continuous forward movement, and that's just not realistic, and it's actually not going to happen. Don't be afraid of the contractive phases. They are completely necessary in order for us to be able to expand. If we keep blowing up a balloon, eventually it bursts. You're not designed to work that way, and that is not the way that progress in any shape or form is made. Sustainable progress is made through this natural expansion and contraction. There will be times where you progress forward in leaps and bounds, and that feels really fabulous and you feel like you've totally got it going on. And then typically what I see is that we can have even just one ride or one experience where things feel like they've been a little bit below par, and we easily get onto this track where we feel like we've failed in some way, or perhaps everything that came before was a lie and it wasn't really true. We were holding on to something which is not real. But what I want to say is that plateau or that down day is not really that. It's a chance for reflection. It's a chance for evaluation. It's a chance to decide how it is we want to move forward in our best interest and to prune off the things that haven't been working for us. So if you can see it in that way, if you can see your movement forward, your training, the expansion of your comfort zone, the way that you learn things, the way even that your energy and motivation works as this expansive and contractive cycle, you let yourself off this crazy hook that we've designed for ourselves that makes us feel like we need to be going. It's really destructive, and it makes us beat up on ourselves way more than we actually need to. So let's let it go, hey? The other beautiful realization that's come to me off the back of this is the idea of upward cycles of progress. And this is something that correlates directly with comfort zones as well. So if we think of this beautiful life movement of expansion and contraction, training movement of expansion and contraction, then what also presents within that are new opportunities to renegotiate things that we've experienced in the past in a new way. And that's what I refer to as an upward cycle of progress. What commonly happens, like a lot, is that you'll go through something where you have experienced anxiety or a trauma of some sort, or you've overcome something which feels like a big deal to you at the time. And once you've overcome that, we get this idea of it being done and dusted. That's in the past. We've finished with that. Thank goodness that's over. Here we are, this new amazing version of ourselves. And then it can be shortly after or a long time after, we find ourselves feeling those same feelings again. And we're like, I can't believe this. I'm so bummed out about this. I thought this was done. I thought I had dealt with this. And that depression or despondency sets in. What you're in is an upward cycle of progress. Basically, at any time we are faced with something, we're only able to deal with it to the extent that we're able to deal with it at the time, which means that we have certain skills, certain awarenesses, certain understandings that allow us to negotiate what presents at the time within that skill range or within that experience range. Peeling off the onion. I know it's one that we use, a metaphor that's used or overused, but really it is like that. That's the cycle. So you're presented with this experience, you move through it in the best way that you can at the time, and you allow yourself to have a corrective emotional experience within that sphere. And then maybe later down the line, you are triggered in some way or something comes up which brings that feeling back into your system or activates it within your nervous system. It's not a failure. You're not back at the beginning. You're just in an upward cycle of progress. And now you have this invitation to renegotiate that with a new level of awareness, a new level of experience and understanding that wasn't available to you previously. We're always moving forward, but it's not in straight lines. It's in cycles. It's in circles. We're not moving in a linear fashion. And this is something that's really important to remember and that I really want to bring home to you because we are just so hard on ourselves. The first thing that we lose in the midst of discomfort is kindness. And I've really come to understand that being able to be kind to yourself and cultivate self-compassion when you're in the midst of a shitty time or you've done something that you regret or you feel like you've let yourself or other people down in some way, if you can maintain kindness to yourself, you are ahead of basically most of humanity because that's the first thing that we do, right? We beat up on ourselves. Kindness, kindness, kindness to ourselves first and foremost. That wasn't where I planned to start, but I love that we started there because those are some of my favourite topics and some of the things that have really revolutionised my way of thinking and my way of really being able to show up in the world. So I'm glad we had that conversation. What I didn't plan to say about comfort zones at the start was that everything in nature is always looking to maintain homeostasis. It's always looking to maintain a central equilibrium point. And that central equilibrium point, we confuse comfort zones with the feeling of being comfortable. But actually, that's not true. Our comfort zone is just an expression of what's most familiar to us. But that doesn't mean it's what we want. It's just what we know. You really need to get your head around this because what that means is any movement outside of that represents a movement into discomfort, even if it's what we want. So we can start at this point of being nervous or fearful or anxious even, and that could be our comfort zone. Do we want that? Not necessarily. But is that most familiar to us? Yes. And as a consequence of that, does that make us feel the most safe? Yes. Because we always want certainty and we gravitate towards what it is that is known. Therefore, sounds very university lecture style, doesn't it? Therefore, E equals MC squared. No, therefore, any movement outside of that means we are naturally going to be pulled back to what it is that we know. As an organism, as a system, as a part of nature, you are always going to be drawn back to equilibrium. You're always going to be called to maintain homeostasis. And this awareness is really, really, really important because as soon as you start to make movements that line up with the ultimate vision of how it is you want to be or what it is that you want to do, there are going to be things which are activated within you that seduce you into thinking that you should stay the same or that this is too hard or that this is somehow not right for you. What's really important is that moving outside your comfort zone is not going to feel good. It's not going to feel good because it upsets that internal equilibrium point. And that awareness is so crucial. Having the support around you is so crucial. And developing skills to be able to move through that is also so crucial because that pull can be really strong depending on how long we've stayed in our comfort zone and just how familiar and comforting that is to us. So important. One of my favorite quotes is, and I'm paraphrasing this so it's not exactly right, but the amount of progress you experience is directly proportional to the amount of discomfort you're willing to tolerate. And for me, I remember that all of the time. It's not about faking it till you make it. I want to put this in there as well. This is not about pretending to be something that you're not, but it's being able to stand in the power of what it is that you're feeling, recognize that it's valid. It may not be true for the moment, but it's true for you in terms of what it is that's coming up. And then allowing you to take what it is that's being expressed through body sensation, through feeling and emotion, and latch onto the motivating question behind that. And let me give you an example of what I mean. If I am trying to do something, so one of the things in my Brave Bucket Challenge was to begin to ride in the big arena. I'd been working with Dee in the round pen, and I knew that in order for us to go to the clinic, we needed to get outside and work in a bigger space. It was time for us. It hadn't been time previously, so I was really happy to take that step. But as part of that, there was a natural apprehension that arises. It didn't necessarily feel that great to me because it's very easy to go down that line of thinking about what might happen. Now, I'm very conscious of a couple of things. The first thing is that apprehension is to be expected because this is something that I hadn't done before. So that waiting for good feeling was not really going to happen, but also trying to translate that slightly uneasy feeling as meaning that I shouldn't do it was also incorrect. I just had to say, I recognize that this apprehension within me is a very natural expression of what it is I'm trying to do. And it's a call for preparation. That anxiety is a call for preparation. Do I feel like I've prepared myself and my horse to the extent where doing this is a safe and good thing for us to do? Yes, I do. So now I can honor that emotion and say, how is it that I need to be for myself and my horse in order for us to have the best experience in this space? Instead of waiting for me to trust him, I actually understand that he needs to trust me first. Actually, what he is doing is placing his safety and comfort and good feeling in my hands. And so ultimately, what I have to do is make sure that I am holding that gift to the best of my ability and facilitate good feeling for both of us. Before that, it might not feel that good. Even during, it might be a practice process, and it's definitely a practice process that we have to get on board with. But afterward is usually where you reap the reward, where you're like, it feels good to have done that, but it might not have felt good to do that, right? Two different things, two very different things. Standing in the power of what you're feeling, maintaining emotional flow by understanding the motivating question of what it is that's behind it. And it might even be that answer that you give is that you do need to prepare more, is that you do need to get more skills, is that you are unsure that you can actually negotiate what might come up to the best of your ability that allows you to feel both safe. And that's fine. It's not a failure. It's you actually taking information and processing it intelligently so that you can create good experiences, so that you are able to move forward and progress in a way that's keeping you both safe and happy. And to me, that is wholehearted horsemanship. That is such a great way of moving forward and not something that we should be afraid or shameful of at all. Quick recap. Everything moving in cycles. We're contracting, we're expanding and contracting. It's not linear. Everything's moving in cycles, upward cycles of progress. Opportunities for us to negotiate previous information or previous experiences with new awarenesses and new understandings. And that things aren't necessarily going to feel good at the time, but that feeling state gives us information about what it is that we need to take care of and how it is we need to move forward in the best possible way. All of this I'm talking about within the Brave Bucket Challenge. It's there for you now and will be there for you permanently. You can jump on my website, confidentrider.online, and check that out. The sign-up box is on the homepage. I'll also put the link in the show notes for this show, but I'd love you to be a part of it. And if you are listening to this at the time of publishing or shortly after, there is a pop-up group attached to it that I would love you to be a part of. And in the information email that you get as a consequence of signing up for the challenge, that will be there. So you don't need to do anything else but sign up for the challenge and come and join me. confidentrider.online. I would love to have you be a part of it, and have a great day, guys. I'll catch you on the flip side.